everyone, welcome to Squirrel Brain Stories. Just a little reminder right here at the beginning, we're going to be talking about heavy topics. Please make sure to take care of yourself, reach out to a friend if this triggers something in you. Make sure you drink your water, take your meds, and just maybe if you're not in a good place, today is not the day for this, come back to us later.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Squirrel Brain Stories. I know it's been a little bit of a break, but I have a few guests here with me today, and we're doing a little Survivor reunion with the four of us. And just to introduce everyone, you guys know Niko. He's been on the podcast with us before.
Okay.
And then here is Beth. She is new to the podcast. And Theresa here on the end, new to the podcast as well. And all of us grew up together in the Peach House cult. So we wanted to kind of have a little powwow and a reunion and let you guys see us piecing some of the puzzle pieces together and just to join us for this.
Yeah.
And Beth and Theresa will be sharing some of their story too as well today. So yeah.
Yeah.
So they flew in, all three of them flew in just recently. I don't know about you, Theresa. Were you already in Port?
No,
Okay.
Niko and I flew in at the same time.
Okay, so yeah. They all just flew in last week and here spending a few days and catching up, and all of the stories have been crazy. So we're hoping to share a little bit of those with you guys.
Yes.
Okay, so where do we start?
Where do we start?
Well, it's been pretty eye-opening.
Yeah.
The conversations, for sure.
Do we know who, between the four of us, who was there first?
You two were already there when we came.
I think you might have been
I
there
think I was
first.
there first.
Yeah.
So I was attending Bible studies and spending time there before I started living there full time. So I remember when you came. So I must have been the first one, but I didn't move in until after you did officially.
Okay. Yeah, my first day there was the day that I was like, you're living here now.
Mm-hmm.
Singersman, huh?
Yep. Yeah, that was crazy, the whole experience. And then you guys came in within a month or so.
I
don't know how soon or late it was.
I feel like it was right around the same time.
I think you guys might have been attending for Bible studies.
Yeah.
Yes,
I remember you showing up.
Really?
Really?
Yes.
So I wonder if you guys, because I remember when you guys moved and and you guys had all of your stuff and it was all being dispersed and people were taking stuff.
Oh yeah. All of my stuff was taken by other people.
So I think it was maybe you were there at a Bible study.
We did attend Bible studies for like 6 months or so before we moved in, because it was one family brought in our family. Niko's mom and dad, and then they brought in my mom, because technically his mom is my sister.
Mm-hmm.
So our family is pretty much one, right? We came in as a group family, but we had been going to Bible studies by that time about 6 months.
Because I remember going to your grandma's house one time for a Bible study.
Yeah.
We
had a few there.
Yeah, okay.
Every Tuesday night for a while.
Every Tuesday night, yeah.
So, but it was
I was usually in my room.
Really?
Playing video games or something. Yeah.
Getting that in before you got moved in.
Well, you still could.
Yeah, right?
Little did you know.
Right.
That was about to be over.
I was bored out of my mind thinking, oh, I'd rather be out there, but...
Yeah.
Looking back, retrospect... Oh, that was a good time.
Yeah, playing video games.
Yeah, you know what? I think that they sent brothers over to my mom's house and did a few Bible studies at my mom's house, now that you say that.
Really?
I wonder if there was ever any idea of getting like her to move in or not. Because
probably. Oh no, you know exactly what the deal was, is they convinced people, move in with us, abandon everything and give it to God.
Mm-hmm.
So they sell their house and they give the money.
Give it to
Yeah.
yep.
Well,
That's
my
what
mom
happened
would
to
have
my
been a
mom.
prime target, single mom, 2 kids, owns her own. I
Big
mean,
old house.
she,
I mean,
yeah.
you know.
Let us take
She
care
had a
of
house.
you. Let us help you.
And that must have been why maybe they can't, because, yeah, we went to Bible studies at the Peach House frequently, but I have, it's weird because these memories start floating up as I talk to you guys. I'm like, wait a minute. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Well, I remember that when we came in, they had just bought the blue house.
Okay.
Just bought it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, that's why we were moving in.
yeah, because they had just expanded into the blue house and now there was no more room for us. But yes, I think that is exactly what happened with my mom. She was a single mom. She had her own business, a successful business, and it was sell all of your belongings and come move into the ministry and
Give your
God
life
needs
to
you.
God,
And
yeah.
so she shut down her business, sold her house dirt cheap, and gave everything. If we didn't sell it, we had a garage sale and we just gave everything away. And whatever didn't sell right away, it was given to the ministry because like my brother didn't even have a bed, and pretty much all I got to keep was my bed. You know,
I had a bed
nothing
for a
was
minute.
sacred.
No.
I had a
no.
bed for a minute,
Mm.
and then
Yeah.
somebody confiscated it.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody
else needed
appropriated
it.
it.
Yeah.
So crazy. And one thing that we've been noticing in our conversations is even though, I mean, we were all isolated from the outside world, but we were all really isolated from each other too. Because as we've been sharing the different stories and things we remember, it's been really crazy to see how much we didn't know what was going on with each other. You
Yeah,
know?
How much we thought we knew, and now we know we
Yeah.
didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to talk to the girls.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that
was not
for a long
allowed.
time.
In fact, I was called a faggot.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to hang out
I
because
remember
you're
that.
trying to talk and hang
Because,
out with the
yeah,
girls.
I was just hanging
But we were
out.
nicer than the boys.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think that was probably the point. And, well, I don't know. My mom was a single mom for a long time. But, I mean, I don't know. I just always felt more comfortable around girls.
They definitely, it was you're either studying your Bible or you're doing a chore or you're doing a task.
Yes.
There wasn't like, we couldn't sit around and just
If
chit
you
chat.
have time
Right.
to lean,
No
you
time
have
for
time to
comparing
clean.
notes.
Really? Did you hear that?
Yes.
Oh. I mean, I know I've had a not procrastination, what's that other word? Complacent. I have complacent issues. Like if I'm sitting down too long, I feel guilty and I feel complacent and I need to be productive. And then that's what drives a lot of my like busyness.
Yeah.
And I feel like
That's
I
how
feel guilty if I'm
too.
not like staying busy, you know? And Buck's like, it's okay to sit down and take a break.
Yeah.
He's like, stop moving around. You're making me nervous.
Yeah, for me it's
Joseph
I
says
can't
the same thing.
I can't sit still if somebody else is doing something. So my mom will be like washing dishes and I have to find something to do because I cannot, even whether I'm reading or doing homework or working myself on my laptop, I cannot be sitting still if anybody else is working. I can't.
Yeah.
Just can't do it.
I guess
Yep,
maybe I'm
I
the
get that
same
too.
way.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm the same way when Buck is,
Gotta be
running
busy.
around doing stuff. I'm like, what do I need to do? How can I help? You're making me nervous. Like, I feel like I need to do something, but I don't know what. Give me something.
Yeah.
It's just all the guilt.
Sometimes I even have to ask her, Mom, can you please sit down just for 5 minutes because I really got to do this. You know?
That's crazy. And like, when we were growing, did you all feel like there was no autonomy? I mean, what is your take on that? Did you feel the freedom to express yourself? I mean, were you guys, I know how I feel, and I've, just pretty much being a shadow and feeling like I was in a foreign country and everything dictated for me. But what is your guys' takes
You
on?
know, I, to this day, several decades later, I still struggle with that because I don't know how to own my own words. I don't know how to put my feelings to words. I don't know how to own my own feelings or think my own thoughts. And sometimes I'll have to ask somebody, now what do we think about this situation? Because I don't know how to put to words what I feel because I'm afraid to. Because I'm afraid of being told that I'm wrong for thinking or for feeling a certain thing, or how bad I am for thinking and I shouldn't be, or you're wrong for thinking that, or
Yeah.
I have no right to think that.
So you're still feeling a gap with the autonomy and the self-identity, it kind of sounds like, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
Reconnecting with that part of you that is still hidden away.
Big time.
I mean, it took me a long time to be able to express myself because, like, feelings were evil. And, we never were supposed to say how we felt or what we thought because that was worldly and that was evil and we were being sinners and stuff. So, like, Buck has been working very hard since we've been together with me on that and getting me to try to open up more. And it's like, what are you feeling? How do you feel about this? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, that's not really an answer. And so I've started doing that the same thing with my son because I see the same trends in him. Like, I've definitely opened up more and showing more love and telling him I love him. But I know with my older children, that definitely was a huge gap. Like, you're not supposed to tell your kids that you love them or that, give them encouragement because you don't want to boast them and make them prideful and that will be their downfall.
Yeah, what was that? Spoil the child.
Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Spoil the child.
Yeah.
So I remember them distinctly with that message of kind of, you need to die on the cross of Christ. So the you that wants autonomy needs to die on the cross of Christ, and you reborn as his servant. So my strategy was find work that I liked. So I would be like, I want to go change diapers or play with a baby or cook or do something that to me seemed like a task that's like, let me be a servant, but let me pick the task. So I tried to stay busy all the time by doing things that I felt were helpful. Because I liked I was 11, but I was like,
you love the kids.
I love the kids. Yeah. So I was just like, let me just stay busy and stay of service. I don't think it occurred to me that I was even a person or that autonomy. I never asked myself, what do I want? What I need? It was like, what should I be doing? So I don't even think
what's needed of me.
I don't think I even knew what autonomy was until much later into my adult life, because even now I struggle to isolate my thoughts and feelings and needs from what everyone else needs.
Yeah. I was gonna say autonomy. That to me, that's a very recent discovery.
Same here.
Because I just didn't consider that being an option. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I know. I definitely experienced. I think it's probably just with, when I met Buck and, been in that relationship and learning through that, the autonomy part. Like, oh, I can say what I want for dinner. Yeah. I can decide what I want to go do for fun. Like,
Simple
I can say,
shit.
I want to go here. Let's go here. And have someone that, agrees with you, and lets you do something. Like, just like the release of the bondage, kind of, in a way, was more kind of like we were slaves in a way. I mean, I felt like a slave. I felt like a prisoner.
I think we were, to be honest. I think we were very much like that.
Because why were we chased every time we tried to leave?
I think every one of us
literally
was chased.
Every single one of us was chased
at one time or another.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true, because that just made something click now. Because remember when after my little sister was born and I was going back and forth from the Peach House to my mom's because they wanted me to babysit for like super cheap. And then when that was happening, and I would only come like on the weekends during that time for Bible studies. And then that's when Luis came and he's like, he talked to my mom, and that's when the whole marriage discussion happened. So I wonder if that was to rein me back in to the Peach House because they felt maybe they were losing me.
I vaguely remember you guys like spending more time together, and you and Luis being more like associated with one another, like kind of out of nowhere.
I was doing his laundry at my mom's house before we were even married. That. He would give me his laundry and he would say, "Here, you have to wash this. You're gonna be my wife."
Yeah, I remember like clothes exchange on the nights that we did Bible study at your mom's house.
I remember my parents taking you guys to the river.
Yeah, in the big van.
Or
on dates.
I think the little Honda. Then didn't they have a Honda at one point?
No, I think that was Nacho's
van.
Nacho's.
Yeah, no, we went in the big van, your grandma's van.
The one with the cushy seats.
I remember going a couple times.
You went a couple times? Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe we went and got a
Whopper.
I
would play.
I think I went to your mom's house once.
Really?
We probably did go
before
Whopper
your sister was born.
Because
okay.
For like they were 99 cents, and it was
free
called
toppings.
A Whopportunity.
Whopportunity.
And when I say that, other people are like, "What are you talking about?" But it's a real thing. It was a thing in at least the Pacific Northwest.
That would be a treat after going to preach nights, like on the way back home.
Yeah.
Like it was
extra
a treat.
Everything, please.
Yeah, all of them were extra everything, right? It's so that we could get full.
Okay, but I remember someone specific taught me about. It's called a Whopper Heavy All. Yep. And they put extra everything on it, and like that's something I was taught and that I did for years after I left the ministry. I didn't realize everybody
else. I even know
else.
who taught you that.
Yeah, you know who taught me that? Yes.
I think they were all ordered like that, heavy all.
I guarantee it originates from one person.
Yeah, it does.
Was it my mother? Because I feel like it would be my mom.
No, it was Bill.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
It was like, you got to order it this way. This is the best way you can order it. You just say heavy all, and they give you heavy, extra everything.
Oh my god, I didn't know where it came from. I just knew that's
funny.
That's how they were ordering it. And I was like, this is nice.
Now
even before the ministerial place.
Oh, so it didn't come. So
yeah, so I was like, I didn't even know who that came from.
Wow.
Interesting.
My mother, right?
Yeah, okay.
That's why I'm like my mom.
My god.
She still says that.
She still asks for a heavy
all, yes.
Wow. I can't even finish one Whopper with no heavy all.
And you know what's so funny about that is that they're smaller than they used to be.
Are they?
Yeah. They are. They're like half the size now.
I got one like last year, but I couldn't finish it. But I don't get them very much.
And the bread is heavier too.
Yeah.
The bread is thicker and heavier.
We're talking about Whoppers, you guys.
Okay.
Whoppers.
Squirrel, guys. Sorry, that was a squirrel.
We all have squirrel brains.
Well,
but you know, those are core memories. Yeah, and those are core memories for us.
Because
they were good memories.
To Burger King,
and those are
far
in between.
At that time, that was a treat.
It was.
That was the only treat, unless we got an ice cream when we were out preaching.
Or a burrito from Burrito Loco, which was so good at the time. And let me tell you, I took my husband there 25 years later.
Not very good.
It's not as good as you remembered.
No, the beans they gave us were like rotten.
Oh.
It was bad.
They're crazy beans. Of course they're gonna be a little rotten.
Well, you know what? Let me tell you.
I took my ex-husband there, and they were hard.
Oh,
I like the nacho fries.
Those were good. Those were good.
That's how I would order them.
Man, I just remember the carne asada burrito. Let me just get it.
I mean, they were good when they were good.
I always did lengua.
Yeah, tacos de lengua on the way down to Filoma.
Mm-hmm.
That was the best.
That was another interesting
I wasn't that
place.
adventurous at that time.
Well,
that came later for me.
I only tried it because I was told, here's a beef taco, try it.
Here's a
You're
beef
gonna
taco.
like
I
it.
mean, it was beef.
Did you like it? Oh yeah, it was really good. You just ate cow tongue.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's crazy.
Mm.
So, to kind of rein us back in, and it's fine. We love squirrels. That's why we're called Squirrel Rain Stories. But, when I arrived, I had like a pseudo mom. Did anyone else feel like they had like a pseudo parent that was kind of the person that took them under the wing when you guys first arrived and like kind of protected you, or at least that felt like kind of protection and like love and care?
I had an official and an unofficial. So I think someone was designated to kind of be in charge of me. And she was a single mom with 2 kids. But
Was it my same pseudo mom?
Yes.
Probably.
But the one that I gravitated towards was
a
a newer member who had 2 little girls, and we kind of clicked. And part of it was I loved her. Her kids were, I don't know,
adorable.
I want to say like 6 months and a year or 2, like they were toddlers, and I want to say they were both, or I think they were both in diapers. Like one of them would be on my hip and one of them would be like toddling around. And because I love kids, I was like, oh my God, they're so cute.
Yeah.
So I was like always with her girls, so therefore I was always with her.
Well, and she had a great personality. She was very lively,
and she taught me how to cook.
With
So she
other
taught me
people,
how to make albondigas,
and she kind of knew how to dance.
Oh
a
my
little
God,
yeah,
that's
she
my
taught me how to
favorite.
make lengua.
Okay.
She like went to
Oh,
like
I
got the
remember
beef tongue
that.
and like plopped it in the pot. She's like, you put it, salt the water a ton, and you boil it for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours until it's tender. Like so, she taught me.
That.
And I'll tell you one other
I
core memory I
that's
have.
So funny. I was
because
there for
I
that.
speak fluent Spanish now. She gave me a list of words in Spanish, and she said, until you can pronounce every single word on this list perfectly, don't speak Spanish, because I'm not going to have you associated with me butchering the language.
That is so funny. She did the same thing with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's hilarious. She
Yeah.
didn't do that with me.
Nobody did it with me.
Yeah, she helped
either.
teach me Spanish. And she
But
told
we
me
weren't very close. Her and I, we had a cooking day together for a while there, but I didn't feel like it was ever like as close as like you guys were. I
was
definitely
just a
saw
stupid
that.
little boy, so
they didn't want me to be too close to her though, because she was still like pagan and sinful and new, and I don't think they
she still had contact with the outside
world.
Mhm.
I don't think she was like an approved caretaker. So I had an approved caretaker, and then she was like my chosen,
the secret one,
the one that I
yeah.
kind of gravitated towards. Yeah.
I think it was the same with me at that time. Early on when we moved in, I was still spent a lot of time with my mom. Because I was young, we were friends, my mom and I were friends, and she was respected an older woman. So she got her own room. So logically my room would be where she was. But then as this person that you're mentioning and we became really good friends too, and I fell in love with her daughters, and it was just if it wasn't with you being there, I was there, and then in the time that you were gone when you left, I was always with her. But after a while, I left my mom's side. I was kind of removed from my mom's side, and then I wasn't allowed to be with my mom. And in that time, I did have like an appointed second mom, that was like charged with my care and to make sure that I was being godly and
was that the same person as me? Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I was removed from my mom's room to her room.
So she must have been
like a dead mother kind of thing.
The single girl surrogate mother.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And again, with this person, with that one sister, I wasn't really allowed to spend a whole lot of time with her because of this. I think the same reasons. I think she spent a lot of time with. She had a friend that was much closer to her age. Actually, she was actually kind of close to our age.
Yeah,
but she was married and she had
mom.
kids, and we were 11, 12, and I think she was like 16 or 17 around that age. But being married and being a mom, she was seen as so much older. So I think that she was kind of associated herself with somebody that was even a little bit older than her, that was also around the time of getting married, having her first child, and she didn't have so much time for that hang around 12-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
So
I do feel like she kind of tried to protect us. So
Mhm.
she told me stories of when growing up and being victimized. I remember saying like using the bathroom in the fields and having men looking through the holes.
I remember that and poking their fingers.
Yeah.
Oh my
And so
God.
I remember one day because we before like the band, like we like would sing and have like choir and stuff. So we used to sometimes do harmonies. And I remember one time I like walked up to the front to sing and came back and she told me like your butt is jiggling too much in that. I'm like 11 or 12. She's like, and it's like a skirt that goes down to the ground. She's like, your butt is jiggling too much when you walk in that skirt, and like you're gonna get the wrong type of attention, and you don't want somebody to like she basically was like, you're a target. And I was like, how do I not
be a
move
target.
when I walk?
Wow.
Like try to walk more stilted. Don't. But I think because she'd been victimized, like there was a protective nature about it. But
she knew what some of the
we're thinking.
She knew what they were capable of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We were so young, naive. We hadn't really been introduced to that life yet,
Mm-hmm.
Where we had to take care of ourselves like that.
I had some, bad experiences before the cult, but nothing that would prepare me for the cult.
I did with my father, but it was not something that I was ever conscious of, and not at that time in my life.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like I was preyed upon until I was about 12 or 13.
That's crazy. So do you all, because in my portion of the podcast, I've kind of gone into details and explained that I felt like it was forced labor.
Mm-hmm.
Do you all feel like what we endured, what each of you endured, there was a lot of forced labor that was like free labor that you guys had to do?
Yeah.
With no choice, no yes, no one asked you. You were just basically
You were
forced.
told.
You were told
This is what you're
do it.
doing today.
And what would happen if you didn't do it?
Well, for me personally, I mean, I would be punished. And more often than not, it was harsh. I love my dad. But he took punishment seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And thing that parents say when they beat the crap out of you is that it hurts me more than it hurts you, which is bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. I mean, at least physically. I don't know. I don't know, mentally too, man. I can't tell you how many times I got my butt beat that I remember vividly. And my dad was the type that, like, if I moved or like flinched away from it, you start over.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
And
really?
it came in series. So like one spank was some extra.
So you did this, this, and this. So I'm gonna have to give you 15 for this, and we're gonna do 25 for this, and up to like 50.
Oh my gosh. That's great. And so what about you guys? Do you guys feel like there were things that you were forced to do that felt like forced labor?
I mean, yeah, of course.
Like what kind of things?
I mean, there was the whole food ministry, sorting the food, going on runs to pick up the food, calling searching out stores.
Oh my God!
To
Putting
get the
food down the
donation
disposal.
from putting the food down the disposal that you would think would be like, it's not like pulling a bowl of leftover dinner out of the fridge.
Boxes.
It's like boxes and boxes that you would be
rotting
rotting food down the disposal for hours sometimes.
So disgusting.
And we even had to have that restaurant industrial size
garbage disposal
put in,
and we
so
had
that it would handle
pipe
it.
issues one time too.
We had electrical issues because of that, and several people, including myself, were electrocuted.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Although I'm not surprised.
Yeah, because it was right by the water and.
Yeah, well, I mean, the switch was right there, but I don't know. It was wired wonky or something, and yeah, it gave quite a shock. It was not fun.
Yeah, but there was always belittling if you. First of all, you couldn't say anything. No, I'm sick today, or.
Oh yeah, no excuses.
You couldn't say anything to get you out because you just. First of all, you just didn't even try because you knew that was going to lead to some heavy consequences. But if the event ever happened that, yeah, I had a fever today and I really just don't want to, or I really don't feel it for any reason, then you were just, either it was corporal punishment or you were belittled in front of the entire ministry, or just more work added on, or, and the belittling, sometimes it wasn't just being rebuked for like an hour or 2 hours at a time. Sometimes it would little comments that you would get for months, even for years, like being called a cow because somebody walked into the room and you're sitting down on a chair.
Or you're running around outside playing and being a kid. No. You know how many times I was called a cow? You're acting like an animal. You cow.
Or a whale. For me, it was either a cow or a whale.
I was a elephant.
Elephant, yeah.
I don't think I had an animal.
Mammut. They would call me Mammut.
Mammut. Oh, yeah, I remember that.
So the thing I remember in relation to the forced labor was, so I realize now I had all these mind tricks to make it not feel like that.
Okay.
So you had to either be doing some kind of task, which was either cooking, cleaning, sorting food. I mean, you always had to be busy, but if you could volunteer for the tasks that you preferred, then it didn't feel as much like work to me. But there was no downtime. The only downtime was either praying or studying your Bible. Now, the issue I had with that is they would actually have us like watching kids and doing things until 10, 11, 12, midnight. And then we would be up in the morning for 5 a.m. prayer. So it wasn't in my mind at that time as an 11, 12-year-old kid. It wasn't like this is forced labor. It was like I need sleep.
Yeah.
So I remember nodding off during prayer. And I remember other people nodding off during prayer, and then you would get yelled at. And so what struck me, like, even as a kid, was, why the heck can't we sleep? Why aren't we allowed to sleep?
Why aren't we
allowed I don't mind being a helper or playing with the kids or cooking or whatever, but can we sleep? And we were, again, not, like, allowed to. I feel like it was almost deliberate, like run you into the ground so that you can't question anything.
Yeah, so you don't have the energy.
But I would look around and I would see everybody like nodding off. And it was like we were all kind of like strung out on this lack of sleep and constant activity. But
and
my tactic was like, try to like pick the person you get to cook with, or try to be like, oh, I'm going to go help with this, and go pick a task that you like so it doesn't feel as much like work.
Okay.
And I think that not all of us were allowed to do that.
I don't know. Yeah,
that's
maybe
true.
A lot of us.
But that's a pretty interesting coping mechanism.
Yeah,
I mean that's pretty clever.
So I think in the beginning, because I didn't move in right away.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I was there for Bible studies, and then more and more frequently. So I was still kind of like a guest. So I think the idea was they couldn't put as much pressure on me because I would like go home at night. So they were like, let's keep it fun for her, so she wants to keep coming back. So by the time I actually moved in, there was already an established pattern that I had of kind of like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then it didn't change as much because that had gone on for, I don't know, 6 months, a year already before I moved in. So I kind of already had a groove that I had worn down, and like, I'm very helpful and I'm very busy. and these are the things I'm good at, and they would kind of let me like stay doing those
Because
things.
if they pressured you too hard, then you could just go back home.
Mm-hmm.
That is a good point. And in exchange, the three of us, we were just kind of thrown in.
Yeah.
You know, like we were kids. You were just kind of dropped there and left there.
Yeah, with no parents.
And the rest, Niko and I, we were just like,
Well,
our parents told us, okay, so we're going into the ministry, like it or not. And one day we're packing up and the next we're there. And life was totally different.
yeah, and
Just totally different.
my parents kind of stepped back. I mean,
What do you mean?
besides the punishment and stuff, I wasn't really allowed to be around them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, my mom, yeah, I'd try and go and talk to her, and
I remember them saying, "Don't baby him. Stop babying him." So whenever your mom would try to parent, she would get yelled at. She would get yelled at for trying to parent you.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Like
And
publicly in front of
struggled.
everybody.
She struggled hard with that. She did.
That's crazy. Being an only child too, I can't even imagine the conflict she felt. But I mean, ultimately, she gave into it and let it happen. I guess.
Apparently, we all did.
I mean, I think that
Mhm.
after being pressured and told for so long that you're wrong and that you're wrong and you're wrong, you know, I think we all give into a lot of things.
Well, and once you're living there, like, and you've sold your house, like, what are your
What are you gonna
options?
do?
You sold your house. This man probably has most of your money now. Like, and then you realize, you know, you're being ridiculed in Bible studies in front of everyone. Well, you don't have an easy exit. You're kind of stuck there, you know? And then he wouldn't probably let them get jobs because none of the adults in your family had an outside job.
No.
What was that about?
We lived off the child support that my father sent.
So what was that about? Why weren't they allowed to work? And every Hispanic, except for a very few
because they were needed to do jobs at the ministry that other people didn't want to do or couldn't do.
Yeah.
Or
English speaking jobs.
Or English
like
speaking jobs,
managing
like
the food ministry,
phone
calling,
and managing everything.
Yeah.
That's
which was what my mom
did.
was doing.
And
my sister was the cook.
Yeah. I cooked with
my mom was the one that spearheaded with you know, all the donations and the phone calling and all of that. And then my dad was the one, he was the mechanic, he was the carpenter, he was the driver, he was the teacher for the short time we were taught. And
I have a question though, a different perspective though. Do you think there could have been a hand in play in that as making them feel needed in all of these different roles if was to keep them isolated from external jobs, so that way if they were ever to come and see the truth, they would have no exit, they have no money to get away?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, 100%.
I think that was the strategy, and I think that was the purpose for it. And
because
my
like
dad
every
told me that so many
Hispanic
times.
worked.
Yeah.
Every Hispanic worked except for just a few, and those few were the ones that
the
would
ones
go and
that
pick
had
up
papers, or they had inside jobs that
or the
were
women
in the
Hispanic women didn't necessarily.
The Hispanic women didn't work. No.
Yeah.
No women worked except for the leader's wife.
I want to say most of the jobs that they had were not jobs where they got a lot of social contact, where they would be like, oh my gosh, here's the outside world, and here
there was only one female that I could think of that did have a job, and it was literally in front of the literally at the Kim's dry cleaners right.
But that didn't last very long.
It didn't, and
Elizabeth worked at the Starbucks for a little bit too.
Oh, I don't remember.
But then she had left and then came back and got a job at the Starbucks, and then I don't know what happened, and then she left again, and then I don't know, and then I think they had some more kids too.
I don't see things we don't remember.
They were kind of explicit about you'll be like poisoned by the outside world, and like Satan will get to you. So it wasn't like
be corrupted.
It was somewhat explicit, like that we weren't allowed to, because it was
Evil.
bad and dangerous and
Mhm.
evil. Almost like we had to be protected. Remember how they wouldn't allow us to walk anywhere alone? The sisters.
Yes.
You had to go with an elder sister, even
Not
if you
even across the street.
cross the street from one house. So the peach house was on one block, the blue house was on the next block, but around the corner. So you cross the street, go around the corner, and you couldn't do that
Not
by
even
yourself.
like 500 feet. It
Not
wasn't even
even.
500
even
feet
that
away.
far.
It was
I
like
think you might have
200.
lost eye contact with the windows between the two houses for a few hundred feet, which who knows could happen in a couple hundred feet where they had their eyes off of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally.
The level of control was like a chokehold.
Mhm.
But they didn't position it as control, they positioned it as protection.
Protection. Yeah.
Yeah. So crazy, man. It's just crazy that a place like this, and not only a place like this, the cult, but like 3 separate houses a block from each other, all coexisting, like in the middle of town, 2 blocks from Portland Providence Hospital. And like it
From
just
a
blows my
police department.
mind. Yeah, like
Mhm.
5 blocks from the police station, and 10 blocks from Laurelhurst Park. It just blows my mind that all of this could be going on. And you know how many, like, I've counted the numbers, and I've counted up to like 152 people. But this is, the whole length of, our stay. So people were always coming and going, but we always had at least 90 people amongst the 3 houses. So like, how are all these people to move back and forth, and all this traffic between all the houses and all of
not
the
be
car
noticed.
traffic, and like no one ever noticed or questioned anything? It just blows my mind. Like, if I saw the neighbor at the corner, I saw all these people coming and going, I'd like first think
What is
drugs
going on?
or
Yeah.
human trafficking,
I think
or like, what in the hell,
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, at certain times of the ministry, we did something for almost every one of our neighbors. Whether it was helping to take out a garbage can, or going to the store, or remember
helping
the
Ruth with
neighbors.
her husband.
Exactly.
Ruth hated us.
She
Ruth
did for a
hated
little while,
us,
but then
in
she
the
called
end there,
on us
she
a lot
really
of
needed
times.
our help.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
lot of
Al
times with
got
Al.
so sick, and his Alzheimer's. He had Alzheimer's, and it just hit him really hard there at the end, and he fell a few times, and she couldn't get him up.
I remember several times we would all pile into Memo's car and go down with her to just down to the hospital, and we would be there all night for hours.
Oh,
Go
just
do
make
her
sure he was
grocery
okay.
shopping, get the things on her list.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I would frequently go over there and just
Help
spend
with the
time
garbage
with
can
her,
and
take the trash out.
Yeah.
Sweep the floor.
That's
And
interesting.
that's I
Okay.
think when the neighbor girl did what she did, that built a relationship with her dad. And then there was Rita down the street. And I think people slowly got accustomed to it's the Christian ministry. It's the Christian ministry.
It's a church.
It's a church.
It's a church.
It's a church. So we're not gonna
There's
freak
nothing
out.
going on bad there.
Right.
Wow.
And that's funny that's always the assumption. Well, it's a church.
Nothing can go wrong in a church.
Right.
I do think it was aggressively kind of marketed that way, because the like back to the cross ministries, and it's like, the band, and we go to different churches, and we have a food mission, and we help that. There's a whole like mission and vision statement that they could, I mean, I don't know that they did, because I wasn't part of that conversation, but they must have pushed it out to the neighbors as, this is who we are and this is what we're doing to legitimize and normalize all the weirdness.
And then there was the nonprofit, the nonprofit aspect that existed, for a
last chance ministry
that existed for like 1 year.
Yeah, and it's funny that they used that for so long afterwards. Because I remember it being used much longer than a year.
Oh yeah,
I think it was the
used
name
until you guys
for a
moved
long
to Hawaii.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not just the name. The name kept changing, but the nonprofit status,
nonprofit itself,
and then that's restarted and picked up pretty much in the exact
right?
same way in Hawaii.
Yeah.
We had
Well,
food
in Hawaii,
donations
it
and all
was a
sorts of
little
stuff
bit
there.
different because I don't think that we had the nonprofit organization at that time. We partnered with the
Somebody else.
Ohana Himolele Church of God. And they had the nonprofit already. So we would just
Mhm.
volunteer for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we did a lot of the food ministry activities. Like we would go down
We would go to
to
the food bank
and we would go down to King Park
and Kings Park.
and put out
Olive Park.
No, we would go down to Kings Park, and then we went there for Bible studies and
Olive Park
shooting
was
and
the
all that.
homeless. It was like the
Yeah.
homeless park. So
Mhm.
we would do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday there.
Yeah, because I remember helping my mom make sandwiches and pack
Make
lunches, and we
sandwiches,
would
pack
go
lunch.
down there
And I
give
was in
people food.
charge of like, because when the people came to get a lunch, they had to sign a paper.
Mhm.
So we had
To show how many you'd given out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So we had,
Sounds like
people's
feeding our
names.
Because we had to make record
Oh
of
my
what
God,
we were
I'm so
doing with
embarrassed
food.
because there was this guy, the old German guy, and his last name was Fuchs.
Oh.
And to me, the way I envisioned spelling Fuchs was Fox. Because I don't know.
How
So
dare
that's
you?
how I spell it. And somebody was like, oh my God. And I was like, what? That's his name. It's not his name. Oops.
So we all experienced a lot of, crazy stuff in our childhood and living here. And, I feel like, from my perspective, I feel like there was a lot of accomplices helping Memo, but also a lot of people that were keeping quiet and help hiding the bad criminal component of things that were happening under the houses.
Mm-hmm.
Which would also be an accomplice.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
True.
Sorry, not calling you out.
No, you are very true. I mean, that's I feel like that there was quite a few of accomplices helping him. And
Well, yeah, there were. I mean, I'm not gonna say any names or anything, but we were all just talking about that and how there were very specific people who played key roles in supporting and maintaining
and
the
furthering.
system and
even
definitely
after the
furthering.
split.
Well, I will say, not to justify that, there was a lot of this sense of, I don't know if you guys ever remember, because this is like coming back to me as we're talking, the rules of God and the rules of man, or the laws of God and the laws of man.
Mhm.
So they could justify doing things and saying it was God's will, even if it was maybe unethical or a gray area.
Yes.
Because of course men make their own rules for their own profit, but God's will and God's laws supersede that. So they could always black and white, like, we're good and this is evil. And so I think the people that maybe should have spoken up and been like, wait, what's happening here? There was already a story. Are you on God's side or are you on the world's side?
Mhm.
And so there was, I think, a lot of brainwashing. And the other thing I remember was, for the people that towed the line, you would get praise and this brother is so dedicated. God's going to bless you. And if you asked a question like, wait, why are we doing this? Or is that okay? Or should we do this? It was like, you're questioning the will of God. And you know what? He's going to strike you down and bad things are going to happen to you. So there was this constant social shaming where people that did what was asked got praised, and people that didn't got shamed. So I think people were so scared to step a toe out of line or ask a question. Like, the social risk was like, you would become a pariah if you question anything.
Yeah.
And I don't think we were aware of that because it happened so organically day in and day out that we were like, it was like Pavlov's dogs, you know what I mean? Like, we were just conditioned.
Yeah.
We would
We
be
didn't
buffeted by
recognize it. It just was
Satan.
normal.
Yeah.
Remember that?
You know,
saying?
you ring the
would
bell
be
and your mouth
buffeted.
salivates. Like, we didn't know why we couldn't question things. We didn't know why we were trying to please them. We didn't know why. Like, we were doing it because we saw it didn't even have to happen to you. You see everybody else get either grilled or venerated, and you're like, okay, well, then I learned from them. I learned my lesson. So we were all like on this tightrope.
Yeah. Walking in line. Didn't want to fall off that, man. Yeah, I experienced that, the whole Bible study shaming thing.
Yeah.
And there was no such thing as a quick rebuke.
No.
You know,
That
it was
was,
like the
like,
Bible study
so
was spent
embarrassing.
focusing on you.
That was so embarrassing because once you're the topic in the Bible study,
You don't shake it.
everyone turns and looks at you.
Yeah.
And, like,
you're the main focal
it's so
point.
fucking embarrassing.
And then people adding in their 2 cents. And
Mhm.
why don't we
Yeah.
just pass the microphone around the room? Because that's kind of how it was.
That literally was how it was many a time.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody just piled on because they didn't want to
be a
be
target.
the next one.
The next target.
Yeah.
Yeah, the brainwashing was thick, man, from the get-go. From very, I mean, that was probably the first. It was the love bombing. You know, I think the love bombing was very heavy for a lot of people, and then that's when the brainwashing kicked in because they had once they got you in the doors to the Bible studies. I mean, I didn't experience it. This is what I witnessed, you know, because I was just dropped off. So my experience is a little bit different. They didn't have to persuade me or my mom. I just, you know, showed up there one day because of my mom. But other people that arrived, you know, everyone was so nice to them and so loving and so kind. And then they get there, and then this is, you know, you got to wake up at this time, and yeah, really heavy.
I remember in the beginning it being like freedom through the cross of Christ.
Right.
And it being like this very uplifting message.
His grace.
And then over time it went from the freedom, it went to Christ suffered, so you should suffer too.
Mm-hmm.
And how dare you
die?
Yeah, your ego has to die. You have to die.
Yes. Die daily.
You die.
To the
You
flesh.
die daily.
Yeah.
Anything
Every
you want,
single
anything
day.
you need, any argument, any resistance, that's your ego, that's yourself.
Yeah.
And yourself
bad.
needs to die. So it went from here's like Christ died to give you freedom and you're free to die every day. Don't question
don't
anything.
Need anything.
And nobody could say, but wait, who's the determining factor on what's the truth and the will of God? It's Memo. It's one
Romans
person.
6.
Yep.
Yeah.
But he got to determine the weather and then find a random Bible verse and use that to justify what he wanted.
Oh, yeah.
And because it was in the Bible or Bible adjacent, we couldn't question him or it. But it was very the way things were twisted and manipulated. Like the same verse could be used to castigate you and justify me, depending on which way you turn it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And before you came, Beth, were you going to public school?
Oh gosh, you're taking me back. I remember I went to public school through, I think it was 4th or 5th grade. I went to Portland Lutheran Elementary through elementary, and I think I had just started, I don't know, whatever middle school would have been then, so 4th or 5th grade. I remember my teacher. And then for whatever reason, my mom decided to homeschool us.
And was she actually homeschooling you?
So yes,
Oh.
yes, She had like a whole curriculum, and she would sit there, and my brother and I, she would do it with us. But I think when we started going to the ministry, if I recall, and I may not because I was 11, and I'm ancient now, it was summer, so I don't think we were doing school in earnest during the summer.
Oh, okay.
I think we started attending the Bible studies in the summer, and then, by the time school year rolled back around, she could kind of be like, "Here's your books, do your work."
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or sister so and so will help Beth with her work.
Mm.
When in reality, I was actually, which is funny because I'm a special education teacher, but I ended up helping, like teaching some of the kids and doing their curriculum with them, and then doing my own work myself. Like I didn't have any from 4th or 5th grade on. I didn't have any formal education of any sort for many
You just had your books and
years.
you had to figure it out. No one to instruct you.
Yeah.
What about you, Theresa?
I remember.
Did you have public school before you arrived?
Yeah, so my education started with a private school through the 3rd grade.
School.
Yeah, Catholic school through the 3rd grade, and then I was taken out of that when my parents divorced and put into my neighbor's school just right down the street. Was there for about 2 years, and then I got really sick. So my parents took me out of public school with the intention of home teaching me because I couldn't physically go to school. But from there, I mean, we did the annual testing for, I want to say like 2 years, 3 years, but nobody was in charge of our schooling. And so we just fell through those cracks. Nobody was, there was, I think officially my sister was supposed to be overseeing or studying, and I think she did for like maybe 3 or 4 months in the beginning, and after that it was no one, really no one. In fact, Beth and I were just talking the other day, I think
that book
at one point I would have been in like 6th or even 7th grade, and I had she gave me a pre-algebra book, and I cherished that book because I knew that I needed an education. I knew that I wasn't getting anything, but it was also like time for me to be me. It was time for me that I could say, okay, I'm doing school now. I'm doing whatever. But even that I wasn't allowed to do every day. It was if I had time to find a minute that I could sneak off and just disappear.
Yeah.
I had to disappear, and then I would get in trouble for having disappeared.
So they didn't approve of you learning even on your own?
No. I had to take I took the student book and the teacher's manual, and I would do the work, and then I would check it against it against the teacher's manual, and that's how I got my education.
It's funny, that was like naughty. Doing schoolwork was almost naughty. I remember, our primary responsibilities are to the ministry, so cooking, cleaning, Bible studies, and then if we had extra time, yes, we could use it for schoolwork, but that had to be secondary or even tertiary.
And when did we ever have that time?
It was few and far between.
Yeah. I mean, it happened very occasionally.
I want to say a couple, again, it's a long time ago. I want to say a few hours a week or a few days a week, like, maybe Monday, Wednesday, and Friday would be like an hour or two where you get to be like, I'm doing schoolwork. Nothing else needs to happen. Right. Like, I can do this. Yeah. And they'd be like, okay.
I think Beth also there was still a certain level of accountability that he had to your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think you got a lot more freedoms and a lot more of that Beth time. Like, I don't want to sound wrong when I say this, but it almost seemed like you got away with more because your mom there was still that accountability between Memo and your mom.
It's true.
Whereas
I would be like, my mom's gonna get mad if I don't do my schoolwork, and they'd be like, oh dang, okay, I guess you can't. I used that.
Whereas our parents, we couldn't use that because it would have turned on us.
Oh,
I mean, no one offered me any school.
Yeah.
I had to buy my own books, but after I got married.
Yeah. Well, you had that very, very short time, and I don't even know what that was about. But you went to high school for like 5 minutes.
I know.
I don't even know why all of a sudden you were going to school.
I think that was because they brought me back home for that short amount of time to babysit Jessica. And then for whatever reason, they thought, well, I didn't even finish middle school. So I had just started middle school, and then all of a sudden here I am like doing a few months of high school, and like I know nothing, and I don't even know how they were able to register me since I hadn't even finished the first year of middle school. It's so mind-boggling.
It was your age.
But like, just push you
along. I don't know state to state, like the laws are different. Where I live now, they basically socially promote you until high school. So there aren't like credits that you have to have finished in middle school. They'll socially, if your parent says, I think that they aren't ready for the next grade, like they could hold you back, but it's more a conversation between the parent and the school. Then
until you get to high school.
And then the credits.
Then you have to accomplish certain credits.
I think that's not everywhere, but that's the most common.
Yeah. So if you're 15, you're gonna fall, even in high school, you'll fall into wherever your age group is.
That's crazy.
And then if you don't hack it, you don't hack it. You repeat that grade.
Well, I think this is a good stopping point. We're gonna take a break, everyone, and we're gonna come back and we'll go into some of Beth's story a little into detail and into Theresa's story into detail, and then we'll kind of come back and, do everything together and have some of Buck's feedback and questions as well. And so we will see you guys shortly. We're going to take a little break, and we will see us in the next episode. Bye!